Welcome to the Inviting Shift podcast. I'm your host, Christina Smith, and I'm a life coach for women who want to feel confident and embrace their own self-love. This week, we are covering confidence and self-love through nourishment. So you may not think that this is related, and I know that it is, that when I feed my body better foods, I think better, I have more energy, I act better, I show up more like I want to show up. And Brigitte is here to share with us how we can make it easier to bring in more plant-based foods into our diet. Now, she is vegan, but she is not she's not telling us that we have to become vegan, just considering more plant-based foods, which I definitely have in the last 5 or 10 years. She also wants us to enjoy our kitchen time. So she is here to help us bring joy back to the kitchen so it doesn't feel like a hassle and just something we have to do, but something that we want to do, that we crave to do, to feed ourselves really good food. I hope you'll check out her book, Flow in the Kitchen, because I got to tell you, it really reinvigorated excitement for the kitchen for me. So tune in to our conversation because I really, really love this one. Well, welcome, Brigitte, to the Inviting Shift podcast. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor.
Yes. And just as I do with just about all of our other guests, I know that your journey has a lot to do with why you're here and the mission that you have. So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to helping people with their food.
I have a funny career trajectory, but don't we all? And my profession originally was I'm a sociologist of science by training. Some people study ants and some people study electrons or distant tribes in the Pacific. Well, I was studying scientists. And that led me to do a PhD in education. And after that, my career goal was not to be a professor. What I wanted to do was help researchers bring their good stuff to the world. I wanted to support researchers in getting funding, and once they have
Mm.
funding, do the right thing with it and organize events and all this. So I was in research management in first in government organization working in clean energy. And then I also worked in a faculty of education of a large research university. And at the same time as I was starting my professional career, and I was in my pretty much mid 30s at that stage, I had my first child. And so you start thinking hard about the future, even harder than before. And, what is this child going to grow into? And what is the world going to be like? And I've always thought of myself as a bit of an environmentalist, somebody who cares about the planet and leaving, every room, like your mom said, when you get into a room, if you leave the room, make sure it's better than it was when you first got in there. And that should be the same, I think, for all of us here on the planet, but it's definitely not easy. And as I was working first in clean energy, I became very impatient because I was working with some of the top scientists in Canada, working on fields like batteries and carbon capture and, fuel cell cars and all things that were supposed to save the earth. And I realized as I was writing those grant applications that those were all beautiful ideas, but they would not give us, take us where we needed to be fast enough to avoid, you know, complete climate destruction and environmental degradation. I was a bit depressed perhaps at that time. And I didn't feel good about what I was doing. And I left that position because there were some organizational changes. I was working in education. And again, I was often feeling, this is all beautiful, the research we're doing about education, but there are some really big, pressing educational problems happening. And I don't feel that we're making a dent in them by continuing to do research. And I'm all for basic research. I think it's fantastic. There's a lot to be done. But I personally needed to have a better grip on, bottom up kind of action. And that is part of the process that led me to decide, what am I going to do with myself? What kind of other professional contribution can I bring to the world? At the same time, my second child was born. My husband was starting his career. He's a medical professional, he's a doctor. And our life was just getting so complicated between his job and mine and the two kids. And I just decided that has to be it for now. I have to have my own business, work my own hours, and be in control of what I have to do, because I just can't keep up with this career that I've drawn for myself for now. And maybe I'll come back to it some other time. I don't know. And so when you start a business, you ask yourself, well, what do I want to do? But also you have to ask yourself, what are people going to pay for? And my idea at the time was I was working with a friend, and we wanted to create this kind of app that we could kind of gamify or incentivize people to improve their environmental practices, for transportation, consumption, and food. And very quickly, I realized nobody wants to pay you to encourage them to go to work by bike.
Do good things.
That's not going to work. However, people will pay you to help them with food issues, because it is a burning problem for so many of us, and myself included. At the time, and still to this day, I think food is we have to eat a number of times every day. We get hungry. It is a pressing problem for so many people. And then there's health issues attached to this and behavioral issues attached. And I was like, okay, I can do something about this, because at the same time, and that's a story for another day, I had decided to go vegan myself, to eat a solely plant-based diet, not only at home, but everywhere. And I was finding it really overwhelming, because people think, oh, vegan is restrictive. And actually, it's the opposite, because when you go vegan, you discover that there's a million ingredients, recipes, combinations, flavor profiles that you had never known about before. And so when you ask yourself, what's for dinner? Well, of course, it can be like pasta with a jar of marinara sauce. And yeah, that's vegan. But if you want to do a little bit more than that, you can be completely overwhelmed with the options. And I cared about, making really good food that was tasty, that was nutritious for my husband and I. We're quite athletic. Our kids were little. And it just took me so much time. And I started creating tools to make it easier. And I created templates and kind of Mad Libs meal plans where you could check boxes and fill in the blanks, and it would spit out the meal plan. And I thought it would be useful. So I shared it with some other people in some Facebook groups where people who were doing vegan family meal planning were getting together. And right away, the uptake was super. Like, people were like, oh, yeah, 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 I love this, make me more. And that's how I got started with the business I have today, which is called Vegan Family Kitchen. And I help people decide what's for dinner. That's still the main thing, but I've come to just generally try to help more people eat more plants, become more confident in their cooking, and find the will and the pleasure that can be associated with cooking. Because I know from my personal experience that very often it can feel like a chore. It can feel like something we're resentful about, and that's not inevitable. I think we can do something about that, because there's so many benefits to just home cooked family meals. And how can we reap those benefits? And that's what I'm fully committed to helping with today.
Oh, that's beautiful, because even these are skills that we can use even if podcaster that you're listening and you're like, I'm not going vegan. This isn't all about being vegan. This is about eating things that feel good. And what I really loved, I have Brigitte's book, and what I really love about it is this flow in the kitchen kind of idea, like how we can have flow in the kitchen, because it's not, I always feel like cookbooks and such give us this one part of the brain that's like, what's the logistical, like, what are the action steps? How do I do that? But that's only good. It's like exercise. The videotape of exercise is only good if we're actually going to get up and go do the thing, right? And so, what Brigitte looks into is that emotional side, like that emotional side that goes But cooking so much work. I'm going to have to go in that kitchen. And for me, for many years, this was why I ate so badly. Like I had like Pepsis and Doritos for breakfast, and that was
Ooh.
not good, not a good diet, right?
Spicy.
But it was like easy. And this was when I was much younger, and we wonder why I have stomach problems today. But I had all the convenience food, right? So it was like always going out was easier. And then the last few years, because of the problems that I have in my digestive system, I've had to learn how to cook. And that took a lot of inner conflict. And I think if I had Brigitte's book, it would have made it a bit easier because I'd have been like, I can break this down. I can do this in a loving way. Because that's what I ultimately had to learn how to cook for myself as an act of self care and an act of self love. Because I know if I order that food out there, I'm going to get sick and I'm going to feel gross for days. And then I have to, that's definitely not self love. And that's definitely not helping me get where I want to go. So even if this is just for you listening about just having more joy in the kitchen, let's tune in and ask Brigitte about some of her, top tips for finding this flow. And what does this flow mean to you? This flow in the kitchen.
Yeah, I want to tackle the first aspect of flow that is so important. And it's funny, I was teaching a workshop last week that's called minimalist meal prep,
Mm.
about kind of like a capsule wardrobe but for cooking, and it was a
Nice.
desk-based workshop. And it was not in the kitchen. I was not actively cooking because we love to watch, cooking shows, and we love to watch those like clever little 30-second reels on social media that's like all happening in the kitchen. But there's everything that's happened, like you say about those exercise videos, that to get the person in the kitchen, to get and all of those aspects are what tend to trip us up
Hmm.
in so many ways. And I find that the thinking aspect and the planning aspect of cooking is really important. And I hate to say it, it does take a little time. And, in Canada, the top two food delivery services, kind of like Uber food, are called, one of them is called Just Eat, and the other one is called Skip the Dishes. And I find it such clever marketing, but so painful at the same time that basically, I mean, it's true. People just want to eat. It is a marketing pain point, and so genius, But the unfortunate part is that we can't neglect those other steps. And the first step is connecting with our why,
Mm.
having that motivation, lighting that fire. And for me, it is because I realize now that every cell of my body comes from the food I eat. And people think, we grow up and then we are what we are. When we're done growing, I've got all the pieces, right? But the fact is that biologically speaking, every cell in our body is replaced on a regular basis. There's a handful of them that we keep for life, but basically everything else is replaced. Even our bones. Yeah,
Mm.
we build them a lot in, you know, childhood and teenage, but every cell of our bones gets replaced every 10 years.
Mm.
And that's what keeps us solid, that we get rid of the old and build new stuff. And so if we only eat substandard, less nutritious food, then the building materials that our body gets to build itself over and over also get substandard. And so no wonder we can feel brain fog, we can feel tired, we can feel exhausted. And yes, there's a lot of other reasons why we might feel that way.
Mhm.
Modern life is cruel in the system that we live in. There's so much busyness and sometimes so little meaning to a lot of
Mm.
the jobs that we have. And we have so much to do. We might feel financially insecure and so many other things that are going wrong in the world. Let's put it that way. But it won't get better if we don't start taking care of ourselves first. And it's hard to get that over that hump, of getting started. But the impact happens, like the positive change happens so fast that
Mm.
once you get started a little bit, you're like, wow, this is kind of nice. And you have more energy to do more good things for yourself and others. And so I think there's a virtuous circle there that is really worth
Feedback loop. Yeah.
pushing into. And that's the first aspect of the practice. And I talk about this, the practice of flow in the kitchen, as a practice in the same sense as a meditation practice.
Mm.
Because you can say, I'm going to meditate 3 hours every 3 months, and that takes care of all my meditation needs. And then in 3 months, I'll meditate again. It doesn't work like that. I mean, it's like
Mm.
sleep. You can sleep 15 hours on the weekend, but it never really catches up
Sure.
for the days of the week that you were sleeping 4 hours, right? And it's the same thing for the practice of cooking, where the more you do it, the more your physical and even neural pathways, you learn stuff, and the more you practice it, the better you get. Of course, it's kind of like riding a bicycle. I think if you've not cooked for 5 years, but previously you were cooking every day, you're still going to remember something. But
But you're
doing it
going
all
to
the
have
time,
to inflate the tires, you're gonna have to check the
yeah,
brakes, right? It's just gonna take you a little bit longer than if
totally.
you were, keeping up on that every single
Exactly.
day.
Keep the momentum going,
Yes.
and that's why I see it as a practice. So, first of all, you have to know your why. And the second aspect is to make what I call the conscious compromise.
Mm.
I think we want everything and we want it now.
Mm.
When I posted to my audience about the minimalist meal prep workshop, I had all those people, sign up, and I asked them, why do you want to sign up, right? And a lot of the answers that I was getting were along the lines of, well, I want to do this idea of prepping for an hour or two on the weekend and have a lot done, because I'm trying to feed 5 different people with 6 different allergies, and I want to cook 3 different meals every night. And I was like, well, you can't do that. If you have a capsule wardrobe that your clothes are, navy blue, beige, and black, you're not going to get an outlandish outfit out of that. And I think
Yeah.
we need to adjust our expectations with regards to cooking
Mm.
in the same way. We need to think hard about what is it that we really want? What is it that we really need? And let go of some of the rest and give ourselves permission. Because when we look at cookbooks, as you mentioned, Instagram, what I call a lot of the food porn and Pinterest,
Mhm.
food bloggers are working really hard to create beautiful recipes. And I'm so thankful for all their inspiring work. But it's not going to happen in my kitchen on a Wednesday night when I just have 10 minutes to set dinner on the table and somebody's screaming that they're looking for their ballet outfit and somebody else doesn't want to do their math homework and there's chaos. It's
Right,
just
and
not
you're
going
just
to
gonna sit
happen.
there and be like, "Oh, yes, 1/4 teaspoon of"
Exactly. Oh, where's the black salt? So we need to make those decisions in advance and be
Mhm.
okay with maybe less diversity, or maybe less explosive flavors in some cases. I mean,
Sure.
but for me, what's non-negotiable is the nutritional aspect and the quality of the food, and making sure that I'm hitting all my daily items. I want to have beans every day. I want to have whole grains. I want to have greens as much as possible, lots of vegetables, some fruit, nuts and seeds, spices. That's really important to me. But if I have the same meal 2 days in a row, that's not the end of the world. And actually,
Right.
I'm finding also that like my kids are quite happy having the same
Mm.
meal 2 days in a row. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to bring a different meal every day. But actually, like, who am I doing this for? Because my son
Right.
would be very content having tacos, like black bean tacos, every single day if he could.
I
And
love this point that you're making, though, about, like, just because we're gonna try to eat more plants or we're going to try to cook more, whatever that goal is for us, does not mean that tomorrow I become Chef Gordon and I can suddenly make all of the meals that I wanna make, and, like, my husband and I, the reason we are so good at eating well is because we only cook 3 or 4 times a week, like, for dinner, and the other nights are leftovers. Sometimes it's just a giant salad and we just, like, put a breast of chicken on it or something, or beans or, something else. So it doesn't have to be, "Oh, I need 7 nights of meals," right? That makes it a little simpler, and I love how you're like, okay, you're not going to have the perfect meals right away, but get some staples that you can start enjoying, right? And okay, if you have to have them every week until you can expand one night per week, which is what I was telling Brigitte that we do, is a couple years ago, we started doing one vegetarian meal a week. And now we do a vegetarian and a vegan meal every week. And so that's like half of the meals that we actually cook. And most of the other time, we are eating a lot more vegetables, which is really nice. But that wasn't something that happened overnight. I didn't go from Doritos and Pepsi in the morning to healthy food and cooking all the time. That was a huge, long process for me. And I think it was just this past year where I looked back and I was like, "Oh my god, it's been over a year since I like really struggled with food and was like, I don't want to cook myself something, right? Because I actually enjoy it now." And one of the things I love about your book is you're not giving like, here's the recipe. You're like, it is a template. It's like, here's, some boxes of things that you might want to consider in your meal, and you can choose how you cook it. Because recipes to me, I have to look at 3 or 4 different ones and I don't follow any of them. I just kind of make it up now in between. I'm like, oh, I like that and I like that. I'm going to leave that because I don't want that, or I don't just don't have it in the cabinets, and I really get to play around. So I think for me, for flow in the kitchen is I need to have some playfulness about it. Like it needs to be okay to make mistakes or try something new.
Yes, and I wanna go further into this idea of playfulness and joy, which is something really important, and you mentioned, you started with the Doritos and Pepsi.
Oh,
That's painful. I can imagine your fingers, your nails turning a little orange there. Uh,
I don't know. My stomach was not good though. It did
Ooh,
not do any justice for that.
I'm really glad that you're taking better care of yourself now, and that's key, but there's a lot of resentment, bitterness, but there's something in our culture that has moved the message to push this idea that cooking is somehow beneath us.
Mm,
Cooking is something that we're not rewarded for. I mean, it gets worse if
unimportant.
you have children and they don't like the food you cook for whatever reason. But
Mm,
like we've really made cooking something that doesn't matter. And that's largely because everything in our society is, around the economy and making money. And cooking at home doesn't make you money. But having a large chain of restaurants, that makes you money, or having like massive industrial processing food systems, that also makes money for the economy. So that's good. So there's a bias in our society that's promoting all forms of industrial and commercial foods. And unfortunately, that is not where better health and happiness are grounded. And we have to realize that that culture has somehow become a part of us. And
mhm.
that might be part of the reason why we hate cooking so much.
I
It's
believe
not
that.
yeah, it's not just like it's devalued. Cooking is something that moms do, or home ec. That's like the last of the topics that we're interested in. But
Mm.
in fact, again, every cell of our body is made from the food we eat. Isn't there anything like how can something be more important than that?
More
I
essential, yeah,
I
and
don't
it's a
know.
really great example is, I grew up in a house where I was a single mom, so she worked 2 jobs. So, Chef Boyardee out of a can, right? Like, everything I thought cooking always came out of a box or a can, and it had the instructions right on it. When people would give me, like, raw vegetables, I'd be like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Where's the instructions, right? Whereas my husband grew up in a house where his mom was home and they spent lots of time in the kitchen, and the kitchen really meant joy to him. So I mean, it's been really great for me to see like, wow, he really actually enjoys cooking. He doesn't mind doing dishes. Like, that's so weird. Like, but for him, his family hung out there. It was family time. It was good connection time. And, they got to taste things. And I mean, they got more than a canned food, so they had really good food too, so it was tasty, and so that's just the difference, how the culture kind of my mom is just like, "Have the calories, that's all you need is some calories and you'll be fine,"
And I mean,
and
bless your
his family
mom.
was
She
different.
was,
Yeah. Oh, yes, I
she
mean, it
couldn't
wasn't
do
her
any
fault,
better
it was what
on,
she knew, and it
you
was
know.
cheap. I mean, let's face it, some of these foods are really cheap as well.
But so, once you and I agree that this is all important. And I'm sure some people listening to us think it's important, but they still hate cooking, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's value if you realize that, yes, you need to make that change for your health or for other reasons, for the health of the people you love, but it's hard to get started. I like to say fake it till you do it, right? Fake it till you feel it. And you can use some tricks to make yourself get into it. And my
Mhm.
favorite trick above all is to have a power song for
Mm.
cooking and a playlist for cooking that I ask my, one of those smart speakers that I have in the kitchen. And so I ask that very smart assistant of mine to play my cooking energy playlist. And I have to
Mm.
be careful what I say because I might be
She'll
heard
start playing.
right now. But so, and there's all sorts of songs, the same sort of songs that I would play to go to the gym, and to
Mm.
hype
Mhm.
myself up and give me the energy. And I'm like, yeah, I get to do this. Or, I know some people like true crime podcasts. That's a thing. Apparently I've never listened to one, but if you like true crime podcasts and you don't have time for anything else in your life, to listen to it, normally, well, make a point of listening to true crime podcasts
Right.
when you go in the kitchen and you have this association and if you're smiling because of the fun you're having listening to that podcast or whatever it is, or you're smiling because you're cooking, your brain doesn't really know the difference.
Just
You're
knows
just
you're in the
smiling.
kitchen and you're enjoying it.
Exactly. So the association gets built in. And so
Mm.
once you have those little practices, and there's like 25 of them or something in the book that I suggest, but just to get the ball rolling, I like putting on an
Mm.
apron. When I put on an apron, some people find it, like it's a housewife kind of thing to do, but I put on an apron and it commits me to
Mm.
cooking. I'm like, I'm here to cook. I'm not here to look at my phone, poke people,
Mhm.
sigh around. you know, I'm here to do something nourishing for myself, for others. I embrace the role of she who makes dinner, and I feel
Yeah.
good about it right away. And my clothes stay clean, which is a benefit. But I like that idea of walking into the role,
Yeah.
and it makes
Right.
a big
So I
difference.
just wanna make one little adjustment is I don't think that it's faking it. I think it's acting as if, right? Act like if I was gonna be a chef, I would wear an apron, right? Sometimes, I mean, whatever the energy is that we can get away from stepping into the energy that we want to feel rather than this, oh, I have to force myself to cook, or I have to, or I should. And instead of that being like, wow, I'm going to make myself something really delicious tonight. And again, if your favorite song or your favorite podcast, like Inviting Shift, is something you want to listen to, this would be the perfect opportunity to do that. For me, sometimes I have to get silly. I'll put a tiara on my head to wash dishes just because I'm like, it changes the energy, right? Like,
I love it. I need my dishwashing tiara. I'm going to do that right away after this recording for sure.
but if it makes it more fun, and again, I love this because this is science backed, is like if we're doing something and we're enjoying ourselves at the time, whether it's that act or not, we're going to associate more joy with it than we have. So that's really a beautiful point. Thank you for sharing that. This podcast is supported by Christina Smith Coaching as a service to get you to have more confidence and self love. One way we do that is by bringing what we learn into our bodies by lighting up our senses. Some people call these types of exercises rituals. I think they're really alignments. Something we do each day to align with what we truly want rather than getting stuck in the default of trying to outrun what we don't. I bet you could use a little self-love ritual today, and there's a short quiz or survey to pick the best one for you. You can go to the link in the description to take the free quiz to get the self-love alignment that is right for you right now. You'll also get a download of 5 self-love rituals so you can switch it up and try one each day. Our little thank you for tuning into our podcast and into your own heart. So with that, we have any more tips for the flow, or should we be talking, should we go on to your
There's one
mission
more
for
thing I want to
okay,
suggest to
beautiful.
people. there's a lot of recipes out there, and I'm
Mm.
sure that I'm not the only person who's done this, buying a cookbook with really beautiful pictures, thinking this is the one. I'm buying this cookbook because I know that if I follow whatever's in it, it will solve all my problems. This is the cookbook that's lined up with the way I want to eat. This person kind of fits my way of seeing about food and whatever. And I'll just do this. Or it can be the same with an appliance like an instant pot. I know a lot of people buy an instant pot because they think it's going to solve all their problems. And yeah, it can solve a number of problems, and so can a slow cooker, and some cookbooks are really good.
Mhm.
But none of that is as good as having some practice and experience and paying attention to what we're doing in the kitchen. And what I realized once I started, because I used to follow recipes to a T. I mean, I was always more flexible. I had this roommate who, if like she wanted to make spaghetti sauce and it said paprika and we didn't have paprika, it was like, that's it.
That's my husband.
Abort.
That's
she
my
she had to
husband.
stop. Or yeah, and if, somebody had to run to the store to get paprika or that was
Mhm.
the end of the recipe, everything would get thrown away. It was very strange to me because my mom was a substituter, I guess. But once I started cooking and paying more attention, I realized that all recipes are the same. And
Mm.
that's a bit of an exaggeration. But once you are realizing, let's say you make soup. And if you make soup tonight, and it could be, let's say, I don't know, potato soup, potato chowder, or something like that. And it starts with sauteing an onion and then sauteing some vegetables extra. And then you add some broth eventually and maybe some, seasonings. And then you simmer and then taste and adjust seasoning. And maybe you blend it smooth or you don't and you leave it chunky, right? And then tomorrow you make a different kind of soup, let's say a tortilla soup. And it starts with, you guessed it, an onion, and then you add some other vegetables and you saute and you add liquid and this and that. And they're all the same.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's variation. You could, I suppose, put the onion in at the end, but it would be strange and it would cook taste of uncooked onion, right? So
Right,
once
raw onion.
you realize that there's that structure across different versions of the same dish or like a stir fry, then you
Mhm.
don't need a recipe anymore. And that is the
Right.
ultimate state of flow, I think, is when you can open the fridge on a Friday night, pull bits and bobs of whatever is left before you go get groceries tomorrow and make a meal out of it. And once you understand what I call that grammar
Mm.
of cooking, you can really experience some extra great flow. And the second half of the book is all about deconstructing five, six, seven main, what I call the main standard dishes of, the Western healthy vegan cooking canon, if you like,
Mhm.
and explaining how it's made. And I understand some people like to learn by example, and that's another way to do it. Of course, you can do five different stir fry recipes and by yourself come to the conclusion that there's a structure to it. I like to learn the other way, and to look at the principles first and then apply them. And the truth is that all of us, practically all of us, know more than we think about cooking. If we've cooked even for a few months, if we've made even a few meals a year, we've learned something. And sometimes we just need to take a pause, take a breath, and think like, what should I do here? What do I want to accomplish? And how am I going to get there? And you can put that into practice, and then if it doesn't exactly turn out like you wanted, well, that's okay. Learn your lesson. It's rarely, especially when cooking vegan food, plant-based food, it's rarely going to be inedible.
Mm.
Sometimes, unless you burn it or you dump the salt shaker in it, it's probably going to be okay. It might not be the best flavor combo, but pay attention and examine what you've done and think, well, it's missing a little bit of that, maybe there's too much of this, and you can do better next time. But
Right, and
understanding what you're doing
yeah,
makes a huge difference.
learning. Yeah, and I think that that's huge. That's exactly how I do soup. It's the same thing every time, and every time I make soup, every week I make soup because that's what I eat during the week because it's easy and vegetarian and it feels good. Um, and my husband will be like, "That smells good." I'm like, "It's the same onion and celery it was last week." Like,
But,
it's the same, but then
we
you
think we
change the
like
flavor.
diversity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we think we like diversity, but really we do like to have some of the same things over and over
Yeah, and
again.
the flavor, I mean, you can change that. Like once you learn to play with the flavors, right? And the only way for me to have learned, like what kind of flavor does thyme give to my dish versus rosemary versus that, we have to know those things. And I find it a shame that we don't really value those home ec classes, even if they even offer them anymore before college, right? Like we don't offer these things, and food is the most essential, and how we've downgraded the value of people and even of the food. Like, I mean, look at all the food. Sometimes I see what's in people's grocery carts or on the shelves, and I'm just like, how can that food is blue, like it's dyed blue? That can't be real. It doesn't look like, or like what plant did that come from, or even an animal, like it's hard to tell. So I know that we wanted to also touch upon this piece about, we have all these midlife women is the really the biggest part of our listening audience. And I know that our bodies change. I know that in the last 5 years, when I've started being in perimenopause, my body has changed a lot. And the way that it reacts to certain foods now is much different than it was when I was younger. And so, how is it that, eating more plants can help us through this shift of hormones and all the other stuff that's going on?
Yes, I want to preface this by saying that I'm not a physician, and anybody who's experiencing debilitating symptoms should definitely see a proper health professional.
Absolutely.
Sometimes my husband asks me about whatever ailment he's suffering from, and I'm like, I'm a sociologist. And he's actually a doctor, which makes it even more funny. I'm like, thank you for asking my sociological opinion. But I do have a couple of certificates in nutrition. And I think basically the more plants we eat, and especially fruit, vegetables, whole grains, we get a lot of antioxidants. And those are key to so many different processes in our body that help with things like reducing a lot of the symptoms of menopause, like hot flashes and
Mm.
those kinds of things. Also, another one of my preoccupation as I am aging is obviously for a lot of women, breast cancer. It's something that a lot of us are thinking about. And it's so sad that this has been so muddled and confused for some people over the past few years. But we know very well now that like drinking soy milk is preventive of hot flashes and also helps with the prevention of breast cancer and reducing recurrences. And those are things that are really near and dear to my heart, because I really don't want to go through any of that as I age. And also, something that we know about aging women is that we're a lot more susceptible to heart disease than we think we are. And unfortunately, heart disease in women is often misunderstood, misdiagnosed, ignored, because we have this idea that men have heart attacks and they get, I guess, VIP treatment in the line when they have some symptoms that are easily recognized by their physicians. But women die of heart disease in great numbers. It's, I think, one of the first two causes of death for women. And the symptoms may be a little bit different, but basically what helps there in terms of prevention is, you guessed it, eating more whole grains, eating more fiber, eating more legumes, eating more vegetable and fruit. And when I think forward, I'm really hoping that more people embrace a diet that's more plant intensive, because we think sometimes as we age, that, oh yeah, you got to die of something, or yeah, something will happen to me. But I think we don't exactly see until it's too late that those it's not like it's all good, it's all good, it's all good, I'm dead. It doesn't happen like that. For the vast majority of people, there's just a loss in quality of life from living with heart disease, living with type 2 diabetes, living with cancer. I mean, most people don't die of cancer. Actually, the weird thing is that most women who have breast cancer die of heart disease.
Mm.
And that was a statistics that just shocked me when I heard about it. So now we are pretty good at treating breast cancer, but the same kinds of lifestyle issues that trigger breast cancer are also contributors to things like heart disease.
Mm,
And eating a plant intensive diet, it doesn't need to be 100% vegan, right?
right.
And actually, I got to say that not all vegan food is necessarily great. We have
Oh,
lots of,
absolutely. There's lots
coconut
of
ice
food.
cream is delicious, but it's got a lot of saturated fat, and that's not a great idea. Um, and so all of those things as I age, I think about because my father passed away, sadly, with Alzheimer's disease.
Mm,
And I've seen a lot of what's going on in care homes with people whose body and mental uh, faculties are declining as they age because of all of these different combinations of problems. And it's not fun. It's
mm,
sad. It's a massive drain on the caregivers, on ourselves. As we have all these aspirations of wonderful things we'd like to do, but when you're um, suffering from different health conditions that you don't control, that you can't predict, that you have to go to all these medical appointments just to keep yourself up, that sucks. And I just hope not to have to encounter that. I think eating well, doing exercise, the regular stuff, sleeping, reducing your stress, having healthy relationships, it's not a armor. It's not, a shield that will protect us from absolutely everything. There's cracks and things can happen, but it statistically just improves our odds of having a healthier life for longer
mm.
and being able to show up for ourselves, show up to be with the people we love and have some fun. Because by the way, it's important to have fun too, right? So
Right.
I'm really hoping that people can embrace those changes, not necessarily for ethical or environmental reasons, but just because they don't want to put up with that. Some of the crap of aging that doesn't have to happen.
Mm. And I think that we've studied, at least in the United States, that I mean, we have way more meat than the actual benefits of it, right? I mean, many cases, there's people who have meat at every meal every day. And that, I mean, that just, it's just unsustainable. So, I mean, that is an environmental concern that I have. It's just not sustainable. And when I was learning about that is when we started going to more and more vegetarian meals. And so, like I said, it's taken us a couple of years and we're at the halfway point where most of our snacks and our lunches and breakfasts is quite vegetarian. I mean, once in a while there's eggs and bacon and such, but most of the time we're actually quite good. He eats oatmeal. And then our dinners, we really essentially end up eating meat maybe 3 times a week total. And that is so much less than we used to. So it's for me, it's that, like we were talking about, a feedback loop. Like I start feeling good about it. And because we've been playing with it for 2 years, it's so tasty. Like the food is so good that like on a Friday night when we used to order out, we like look at the DoorDash or whatever, and I'm like, what we have is so much tastier. Let's just go make something really quick. So, and by the time that they would get here anyway, I could have gotten up, I could have made myself something, and I could be using all that produce that otherwise I might have to throw out because I did not use it. So, there is a really beautiful feedback loop with all that.
And what else are you going to do with your time, right? Like, let's say you order and you have like a half hour to wait. You know, I mean, some people will do very beautiful work during that period, and maybe they will use that half hour to practice the piano or work on this painting that they've been working on. But most of us will do some kind of mindless scrolling on the
The
internet.
DoorDash thing saying, when is it coming? Is it almost
Exactly.
here?
So, like between being on your feet, because there's a great satisfaction, there's
Mhm.
something special that happens in our brains, and I'm not quite sure what the pathways are, but when we've made something for
Mm,
ourselves, there's a great satisfaction. I mean, I'm assuming it's the same thing. I'm not a woodworker, but I know some people make beautiful furniture, or
mhm,
people who sew their own clothes. Like when you wear the clothing you've made, you feel like extra special and you feel empowered. And there's that same feeling that we can get 3 to 6 times a day preparing our own meals and get that hit of satisfaction, of empowerment, of being enabled, feeling our power.
Yeah, I feel that way when I'm gardening, right? Like
Yes.
look at me, I'm magic, I make food.
And it's the same, absolutely. And if you cook, the zucchini you've grown into your
Mhm.
own zucchini bread, you're like, I rock. I found that when I make pizza, because pizza is the thing that the pizza man does, right? That there's a,
Mm,
a strong association, or sushi is something you can only eat out. And pizza, I hate to break the news, is the easiest thing to do. It's
super
like the dough
simple.
is flour and water and yeast and a bit of salt and maybe olive oil. And if you're fancy, like, you've got that at home. You can do it. It
Mhm.
won't be exactly the same the first time you do it as if you had it from an experienced dough maker, but you've made pizza.
Yeah,
What kind of a
yeah.
superhero are you?
Yeah, we started making pizza when we moved to the Southwest, and there's no East Coast pizza here. So my husband started making it, and it's delicious because we can put whatever ingredients on it. We can use the kind of cheese we want to use, or whatever. You can put on vegetables, stuff that they don't have. You can put on the vegetables from the garden, which is what I love. But it is really super simple, and you get to use the flour that you choose, not just whatever they've packed in there. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm sure that we could go on for days and days and days about how, because I'm really super excited that I have actually been able to shift the way that I am in the kitchen. I'm still working on it. There's still a couple of days where I'm just like, I don't feel like it.
And that's
Um,
okay. That's fine. Like, you don't
but
have to do it every single day,
right, but
but
it
most
becomes
days.
easier. But then even when on the days where I don't feel like cooking, it's like, okay, we'll just chop up a salad and, put that in a bowl, and that's still good calories, right? It doesn't have to be some fancy meal or whatever. Um, so we're just looking at flow in the kitchen. So for those of you who are wondering, what is the book that we were talking about? Brigitte Gemme has this book. It's called Flow in the Kitchen: Practices for Healthy, Stress-Free Vegan Cooking. And even if you are not looking for being full-time vegan, if you just want to revisit some joy in the kitchen, she's really got a lot of good thoughts, tools, skills for you to kind of build on, simple ways that we can start finding more joy and finding the importance of being in our kitchen again. I actually quite enjoy it now. It's a great time for me and my husband to connect and have conversations and, just slowly watch the food cook. Like it is actually quite nice. It's a relaxing time, and it can be for you too. Um, Brigitte, though, you have a special gift for people, and I'm going to put the link below, but she's got something special for you.
I do. I would like to invite everyone who is interested in eating more plant based dinners, just to give it a shot for a week. I have a 5-day meal plan that I've created that's based on my flow in the kitchen practices, that involves a little bit of batch cooking on the weekend so that you can enjoy really, really good food on weeknights without the stress. It's called the Planned and Plant Based Challenge, but it's just a 5-day meal plan. So if you go to veganfamilykitchen.com, it's right there and you can sign up for it, and you'll get a few emails from me to give you a little nudge, a pat in the back, and sometimes a gentle kick in the pants to motivate you to do this for yourself, because it's the same as airplane safety. Put on your own oxygen mask first, take care of yourself, eat food that you really want to eat that makes you feel good, and it will maybe be the starting point to make everything else better in your life.
Mm. It is an essential part of our lives, this eating thing. We can't get away from it no matter how hard we try. So we might as well actually give it the importance that it deserves and enjoy it. That's what I love about this flow in the kitchen. So thank you so much, Brigitte, for being here today and really sharing this and not getting all preachy that some of us still eat meat, but just encouraging us to look at our own health and how we can just increase our plants, right? At least get the minimum required each day would be a good start for many of us. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And listeners, we'll be back next week. Thanks so much for listening. Hey, one more thing. When we are all more confident and full of self love, we can act more intentionally and mindfully. What would a world like that look like? I want to know. One way that you can help me with this vision is to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps more than you know, and it's just a few clicks to help me create a more beautiful world. And as always, remember to be gentle with your humanness.